All right. All right. Well, then let's get started then. Again, thank you for showing up. Let's see, we're sharing. Abhishek, can we see my screen service design for access? Can you see the slides?
Yeah, we can see it.
That's perfect. All right, well then, let me get started with that. So today we're going to do a small survey of what service design is in terms of accessibility and some of the advantages that it has in comparison with more touch point based uh, design processes like UX UI design. And we are going to start by telling you a little bit about me. So Elisa, for those of you who know her, she was meant to co-present with me today, but she's feeling unwell, so you'll have to do with just me. If we haven't met, here's a little bit about me. I'm Greg Solis. I'm a product and service researcher and designer. Over the last 8 years, I've focused specifically on improving access, primarily in problem spaces of healthcare and mobility. I've worked with organizations ranging from large corporations like Bayer, Genentech Roche, Waymo and Avis, TD Ameritrade, all the way to mid-sized renewable energy companies like Repower Solar, and a number of even stealth startups that sometimes don't even have a name yet. I am currently leading product and service design for a platform called ErgoIQ. ErgoIQ is human scale ergonomics consulting platform. For those of you who don't know Human Scale, they are one of the largest manufacturers of office and hospital furniture in the world. Think like a steel case. And they have ergonomic assessment services. In the past, those services used to be in person with an ergonomist, but my studio has helped them design a platform in the past few years that allows them to do virtual assessments as well as completely automated assessments. They are a global product with about 500,000 users, and I am currently redesigning their entire look and feel as well as their functionality based on feedback, usability studies, new feature requests, etc. Previously, I was working with CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I was helping them expand access to healthcare.gov for people who have variable income. So think gig workers, freelancers, seasonal workers. And I was also helping them modernize claim and management systems, both designing cloud native systems and helping them migrate from very old, sometimes up to 35-year-old mainframe systems. As you very well know, those initiatives are getting defunded. And so I am, again, now working through my own studio. And on a personal level, you're finding me today in beautiful Woodstock, Vermont. I typically live in New York, but I have a place up here. And so if you are a New Yorker, please say hi. Or if you ever want to chat, please say hi virtually. I've always been interested in food as medicine and growing medicine at home. So in my free time, I'm nerding out with automated systems for growing adaptogenic mushrooms at home. Uh, and since I've had my knees rebuilt a bunch of times, I also sometimes build e-bikes. I'm working on assisted gravel cycling. So trying to like help folks who have reduced mobility still get out and bike. Now, how am I an accessibility expert? I'm not. It's important to note that even though I have been in charge of making products and services accessible, like a lot of designers are, typically because of economic constraints or team size constraints, I do not consider myself an expert. I'm actually here to talk with you about my experiences in uncovering opportunities to create better services for people experiencing disabilities. And I'm looking to you as the experts. Today, I'm going to present some fundamentals of service design, some examples of the opportunities service design can open for accessibility, and I'm going to make sure we have plenty of time to discuss from the point of view of your own expertise. Also, if you're interested in this presentation, it will be available with the scripted notes after the session. All right, so the agenda. We're going to be working with, okay, so how is a systems issue and accessibility related? Why, what, and what are the principles of service design? What are some of the key tools and methods? A little bit of a deeper look into service blueprinting, a comparison of service design and UX UI design as we know them. Again, blurry lines there. Some of the advantages on service design for accessibility, inclusive research and co-design. We're going to be talking about also the advantages of designing for variability. Some of the challenges we face typically when trying to introduce practices like service design into our everyday design practices and how to tackle them or overcome them. And then we're going to have plenty of time for us to have a conversation. So let's get right into it. All right, accessibility as a systemic issue. Let's start with how service design and accessibility combine to go beyond the advantages of accessible UX and UI design. Accessibility is too often treated as a compliance task, audits, a technical checklist that's applied after solutions are already designed. This typically poses a problem. This typically creates a lot of accessibility band-aids, as everybody knows. And also, since innovation often prioritizes digital interactions, broader systemic problems like organizational policies, customer support, employee training, physical environment interactions sometimes are neglected in favor of digital accessibility. I'll try and add some simple examples of every step so that we can illustrate. For example, consider a banking app that's technically compliant with WCAG accessibility guidelines, but the customer service team isn't trained to support screen readers. So it leaves visually impaired customers frustrated and underserved. Why service design? Many accessibility barriers are fundamentally service-related issues, not just product limitations. Service design provides tools and methods that help us uncover and address the systemic challenges holistically. For example, accessibility challenges in public transport aren't limited to digital tools. There may be bad signage, driver training issues, inaccessible payment methods. Service design methods help identify and solve these interconnected challenges comprehensively rather than focusing on each one in isolation. And what is service design specifically? By definition, service design is a holistic approach to creating end-to-end experiences. By end-to-end, we typically refer to from one end to the other end of a journey, however big or small. And it doesn't only consider digital experiences, but it also includes physical environments, human interactions, organizational processes, and also policies. So take healthcare access as an example. Not just about booking an appointment online, it involves interactions with reception and the receptionists, waiting room accessibility, billing processes behind the scenes, follow-up care, scheduling, and allowing people to attend it. Service design identifies and resolves these breakdowns at any stage of interconnected ecosystems, uncovering opportunities not just in each stage, but also in the transitions within them that are typically the most ignored things, the transition between a physical and a digital interaction, for example. All right, and what are the core principles of service design? So it's human-centered. It directly involves users, especially those with disability, and it involves them at every stage of their journey. It's holistic, so it understands and addresses experiences across multiple channels, digital, physical, interpersonal. It is collaborative. We engage diverse stakeholders from end-to-end users to frontline staff and leadership. And it's iterative. Of course, we're always refining solutions through real-world testing and through co-creating with the people that we serve, from end users all the way to backstage workers, all the way to stakeholders on the business side. For example, when I've worked in healthcare designing wayfinding solutions for a healthcare clinic, I've worked with blind users, learning from their interactions, feedback, and ideas to ensure genuine usability and accessibility, not just from creating products and testing them with them, but rather with a little bit of a co-creation that involves things like doing magic wand exercises where we think of, okay, what would be a crazy way to solve the complexities of this specific challenge? 3 key methods: journey mapping, stakeholder mapping, and service blueprinting. We're going to look at them a little bit in detail in the next few slides. Okay, in this slide, I'm showing an image of the journey of a person who goes through the steps of going to the movies. Journey mapping visually tracks a user's emotional and practical experiences across touch points. To use a more accessibility-focused example, imagine mapping a wheelchair user's museum visit, from seeking exhibit information at home, buying a ticket, to arrival to the venue, navigating exhibits, resting, finding a place to eat something maybe, or to have a snack, then leaving and heading back home. How can mapping the journey help us identify specific barriers across the different steps. It's important to take this into consideration in comparison to systems thinking. The example that I prefer to use is that, for example, if we think about the ocean is a system. But if we're trying to figure out the journey of a whale, the ocean is not whale-centric. And so we have to like change the lens from a systems lens, from the ocean lens, to understanding the whale's journey and all of its interactions, anything from whaling ships to the krill that it feeds from, to understanding water temperatures. So it's actually that's end-to-end, from birth to death of the whale, and from surface to core, so from direct interactions of the whale to climate change and temperature changes in the water that it inhabits that may not be connected directly to the whale, but it definitely impact their interactions with the system. Now, stakeholder mapping is the second level. So now we have a clear end-to-end. Now we're going to see what kind of actors are involved apart from the end users. In this particular slide, I'm showing a diagram of the different stakeholders that would be involved in a ski resort to show an example that isn't healthcare centric. Using concentric circles, I've mapped key partners at the center, for example, the resort management company, primary stakeholders one circle out, for example, skiers, snowboarders, mountain bikers in the summer, but also competitors, people who offer competitive services, the company in charge of ski lifts. And then further out, I have secondary stakeholders, including restaurant, lodges, ski school, ski rental company, things that are not exactly at the core of the service, but are directly interconnected, and that a lot of the end users may rely on to have a complete experience. So everybody involved in the experience, from end users all the way to front-facing staff and even back-end IT support. In the museum scenario that we were just talking about, you could think about stakeholder mapping, including things like revealing communication gaps between ticketing systems and the customer-facing staff that are in charge of checking the tickets. And then lastly, the most commonly known tool of service design, which is service blueprinting, which we use to reveal invisible backstage processes and systems supporting user interactions. In this slide, I am showing a simplified blueprint for the museum visit we were talking about, from the moment a person parks their vehicle to when they leave. Each step in this journey can have physical evidence at the top, and so we typically put that on top. Say, for example, the parking or the exhibition area. Front stage interactions, for example, paying for the ticket at a booth or getting their ticket scanned when they're trying to enter. Backstage interactions, for example, a system that records visitors, that keeps record of visitors. And support processes, for example, the actual payment system, say they're using Square to process payments online for the museum. As we look at the whole picture and end-to-end and surface to core, a blueprint could expose inaccessible museum navigation due to screen reader incompatibility, for example, in the app. We'll take a little bit of a deeper look on the next slide. So the key components of blueprinting are user actions. So this is going to be steps taken by the users. These steps are typically established on the experience mapping that we've done earlier. Front stage interactions. So these are direct interactions that are visible to users end to end. Then backstage processes, as I was just saying, so invisible employee interactions and internal workflows. Imagine, for example, you're going to a doctor's visit, there's someone in the background doing scheduling, there's someone in the background reaching out to the insurance company to process claims, there's someone doing billing, etc. And then supporting systems and policies specifically, so infrastructure, employee training, other systemic supports. Now, blueprinting has the advantage that it helps us in this end-to-end and surface to core understand at which places there are frictions or opportunities to improve. So as we visualize the whole ecosystem, how are those either fully visible to the end user or invisible backstage ways in which we can impact the whole experience? Consider a restaurant. Imagine that the online menu, the reservation system, and even the dining room are accessible, but maybe the kitchen staff use an inaccessible ticketing system behind the scenes, so it excludes visually impaired employees from effectively participating. This is an opportunity to improve the service, even if it's not exactly connected to the end user. Service design allows us to identify these frictions and opportunities that may otherwise not go noticed. Now, how does it compare? There are some things that are common and some things that are a little different about what we typically know or how we would typically define UX UI system and service design. UX UI design typically focuses more narrowly on digital interfaces and immediate interactions, which we will call front stage interactions. Service design, on the other hand, integrates digital interfaces, policies, physical spaces, employee training, organizational systems, and turns it into a coherent end-to-end experience. It's important to note that many UX UI designers in our profession are in charge of end-to-end experiences, regardless of what their title is. While in other countries, for example, in a lot of European countries and socialized economies where the government is in charge of a lot of service design, it is more common to find people that have full-on service design titles. Here in the US, what I found is that very few people I know have a full-on service designer title, and service design is more of a tool that falls into the responsibilities of researchers or facilitators, or in the broader toolkit of a multidisciplinary designer. And what are the most important advantages in designing for accessibility? Well, as we clearly highlight friction points and align solutions across digital interfaces, physical spaces, and organizational policies, we allow the organizations that we are working with to shift towards proactive accessibility improvements rather than reactive fixes after the fact. Of course, for those of you who are designers, the idea of designing an entire system, product, or service, and then slapping accessibility on top of it is, of course, one of the biggest frustrations we find. And so why not design these services taking advantage of the opportunities for accessibility? Now, of course, accessibility, because it's this after the fact thing, is typically seen as an expense or something that can be cumbersome to the system, but we'll see just now how it is even a strong business proposition. Now, it goes without saying, but inclusive design and co-design, inclusive research and co-design mean that we actively involve disabled communities through this entire process, from initial ideation, implementation, to ongoing improvement. For example, city government co-designed accessible voting systems directly with the disabled voters, rather than adding disability access features to voting. And in that way, they ensured meaningful participation at every stage, from voter registration, campaigning, election day, and interactions with elected officials. This is quite common in Europe, but again, it's something that here in the US still has a lot of opportunities for being adopted and improved. Now, variability. This is probably the secret sauce of why service design for accessibility is a strong value proposition. Variability is not at all unique to service design, since variability is about recognizing that human abilities and contexts constantly vary, often day to day and even moment to moment. Variability is best explored through these holistic journeys that I'm talking about, and from surface to the core of the service. Designing for variability also acknowledges that accessible features benefit broader audiences. For example, descriptive subtitles, initially designed for users who are hearing impaired, enhance experiences for commuters watching videos silently on smaller screens, or for language learners, or even users that prefer accelerated playback speeds. So we're seeing how designing doesn't need to particularly signify someone as a disabled person. The risk of designing without variability is that we lose an opportunity to destigmatize products and services that may otherwise other someone as a disabled person. This is particularly negative, for example, when we design for healthcare, where designing for disabilities involved in a health condition may rob someone of their personhood and reduce them to a diagnosis. This isn't just bad because it's unethical, it's also one of the main reasons why people experiencing disabilities caused by chronic disease don't use the products and services that can most help them. it's their way of regaining their agency and their personhood. Like, okay, if this is going to reduce me to a diagnosis or to a non-person, well, then I just won't be using it. Now, what are the barriers or organizational challenges that we typically encounter when we try to add to the engineering UX practices, when we try specifically something that is so cross-functional, something that can help us break silos, but it's also a new thing, an added thing? Well, the common challenges include perceived high costs, securing stakeholder support, and gaps in organizational expertise. The same silos that service design can break act against it. So these barriers often delay or block proactive accessibility efforts. What can we do about it? To overcome these challenges, we can demonstrate return of investment by aligning priorities with stakeholders' higher values. Of course, that means that through the stakeholder mapping, we take the opportunity to discover how to partner closely with stakeholders to align goals, what are the values that they pursue out of bringing this experience into the organization, the market, the system, how can we bridge expertise, how can we bridge knowledge gaps, how can we add pilot programs alongside compelling storytelling. Also, when budgets are limited, we can also limit the size of the journey that we're targeting, focused on what are the journeys that off the top are posing either biggest problems financially for the organization, biggest problems for our end users, biggest problems in terms of feasibility for our technical and engineering teams, for industrial design, whatever, and then seeing which of these to prioritize what the smallest journey possible is where we can have the biggest impact. Say, for example, this kind of impact could look like a hotel chain that goes beyond mandatory accessible reservation systems and accessible rooms and pilots accessible fitness facilities and workout equipment. While this is not regulated or mandated, as a result, people who are interested in these services being accessible will benefit, but also customer satisfaction, the kind of people who would prefer to be in a place that is more inclusive will be increased, their satisfaction, and we can provide tangible evidence that justifies broad adoption by doing surveys, by doing customer satisfaction surveys, by understanding how the brand is impacted through research. So what are the three key takeaways before we move to a little bit of conversation? Well, accessibility is a service, not just a feature. So true accessibility transcends individual product features. It demands a holistic view covering digital, physical, and human interactions. Service blueprinting, because of its end-to-end and surface to core, help us uncover these hidden barriers, these moments of friction. And then proactive accessibility leads to better experiences for everyone and better business outcomes. Proactive accessibility is good business. Inclusive design solutions consistently improve usability and overall satisfaction, benefiting all users, not just those explicitly targeted. There's a clear return of investment for both. That's both quantifiable in dollar amounts and measurable in customer loyalty and brand equity. And thank you for paying attention. That's my talk. Now, I would love to open it for questions, for yes ands, but also for those of you who have thought about service design, who have practiced service design, what are perspectives that might be different from what I'm talking about here? What are any examples of problems that feel like they could benefit from service design, breaking the silos that separate between them? And anything else that we can quickly brainstorm. Abhishek, I don't know if there's anyone in the room that wants to bring something up, or anyone online, please feel free to throw it in the chat.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. You were saying service design versus UX/UI. And my understanding of UX is user experience. So
Correct.
how do you differentiate service design from user experience?
Well, by definition, if we were to be practice agnostic, user experience design is typically the design of every step through a user flow. Okay, and so if we even forget the fact that these flows are typically digital flows, so because a lot of the innovation, a lot of the opportunities for innovation in any industry are digital in nature, the key difference would be that with user experience design, we're typically focused on the interactions of the user with the system directly at any step of the flow, at any step of their journey, whereas service design adds this layer of surface to core that allows us to identify other actors. We call them actors apart from our protagonist or our main user. And so it allows us to go deeper into improving the service holistically, not just through the digital experience, but also across touch points and also across frictions that may be hidden because they're frictions that impact actors that are not the main user. So the U in user experience and user interface typically limits the practices, or in our current day, it typically limits the practices to focusing on the user rather than maybe on other actors that may be impacting the quality of the service.
Thank you for your explanation. It was very clear and informative.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? Yeah.
This is kind of a practical and maybe too granular, but I'm used to or accustomed to UX design processes. How does this and methodology in terms of project management, how does this differ from a service design perspective from a standard project in UX?
So the biggest difference here is that a standard project in UX typically involves users and whatever way in which we communicate users, whether it's generative research, where we directly talk to them to uncover some of their needs, some of their frictions, then the design team, and then typically engineers that are handed out with some layer of product management or project management, as you said. Now, the risk, the efficiency of user experience design, and also sometimes its pitfall, is that it is contained in that digital environment. And the relationship is user, design, engineering, typically. Where service design help us move past some of the disadvantages of that is that service design typically focuses on other areas of the system, like, for example, customer support or organizational policies or payment systems that are typically their own thing. For example, employee training. They're typically their own thing and often siloed from a design organization. In your experience, I don't know how much, for example, we typically, as user experience designers, find tension with folks that are in sales because their objective is to continue selling what we're selling well today, rather than introducing new things. Sometimes there's that friction between, okay, we need to innovate, but also we do great selling this one thing. I'll give you a specific example. I've worked with Bayer, a big German pharma that wanted to create non-pharmaceutical services and products. And so what we did is we helped them create things like digital therapeutics. And we found that this was very conflicted, particularly when we tried to go direct to consumer, because a lot of their sales have to do with representatives, and even their consumer products are sold directly to pharmacies. So they don't have an interest in selling unit by unit, user by user, or actually they don't have the expertise needed for that. And so typically service design help us uncover those frictions early so that when we design solutions, we can actually involve people from sales, people from customer support, people from employee training into owning and also helping co-create the product and the service in a way in which those silos are. Let me know if I can double click on any of what I'm saying, okay?
Sure. So that outlines the research of it, but getting into the solution phase, how does it kind of transition into that?
Also, the way the solution is typically different is normally a user experience design product or a product design product or solution is shown in the form of a digital prototype. A typical solution in terms of service design can be composed of several touch points. So it can, for example, with a brand experience, it can include a physical experience, which, by the way, is one of the things that when we design UX are typically forgotten because we are digital designers and we're just tasked with the digital design or the web design. And so every time we innovate anything, be it entertainment or healthcare, it's clear that there's a part of the experience that is most valuable in person. And yet with UX design, we typically try to automate everything, AI everything, because of course it's where the efficiencies are found. Oftentimes missing the opportunity to go, okay, this particular part of the experience should be a phone call, or it should be, it should be a kiosk, or it should be a direct face-to-face interaction. Think about car rental, for example. What part of the car rental, at which point in a car rental interaction do you want to see a human? Well, if you have a problem, right? So if you have a problem, you want someone to be there, to be knowledgeable, to be able to resolve it. Otherwise, you just want to walk in, take a car, go away. You don't even want to sign anything. And so typically with digital design, we would take care of that walk in, no problem, but it would be very difficult to then design the customer support interaction because that's a different department. Service design help us as a practice, even if you're just a UX designer, kind of like gain a seat at the table earlier when we're actually designing at the systems level, rather than wait until someone decides that, oh, we should just do this with an app. So that's another advantage. It actually helps us sit at the table before some of the decisions as to what nature the solution should have are taken.
Perfect. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. I'm getting an online question from Lorna, and she's saying, are you then evaluating through surveys of users of the services or metrics of some sort? Yes. So measure. Of course, we try and start with generative research, or we try and start with solution agnostic research. But once we have anything, or typically when we come in, there's typically pieces of the service already in place. We do whatever research we have at hand. And so that could be surveys, ideally, particularly surveys that could be introduced at points of friction, like customer support. And it could be rich data, whether quantitative or qualitative, or it could be as much as we can get, like things like Net Promoter, which I hate, and everybody knows is bullshit. But if that's what you have, okay, how can we use Net Promoter to understand if things are working? This question is particularly important because, of course, we're now not just thinking of tracking the digital experience. This is one of the reasons why people love UX design, because of course you can track a digital experience. You can see where people click, you can see where people fall off. Not so much when you're looking at someone browsing through a store, for example, or when you look at someone trying to find their way through a hospital. So it's actually interesting to think that we're evaluating the solution both through the design process as well as longitudinally afterwards, particularly because in a holistic service, typically what happens when you fix something, when you fix, say, okay, like people who find themselves with a problem here don't know how to contact customer support because maybe we don't want people calling in all the time, okay? Well, so once you uncover that, then suddenly you're sending a lot of traffic to customer support. Okay, how can we automate part of the customer support interaction so that people who have legitimate questions can be said? There's a lot of this if you've been online with, if you've been on a phone line with any of the systems that are around, there's always this, hey, we have this, frequently asked questions that you can check out, and then send us a text if you still want to talk. So typically doing this follow-up across the experience help us make sure that we're not fixing a problem by just creating another one. So yeah, there's actually, like you're mentioning, baseline. Well, baseline typically would be how well it's working today. And so you're bringing up an interesting topic, because of course, one of the problems that we also see with user experience design is the agile mentality. And so agile is great. It helps us get doing rather than overthink things and, you know, like go to waterfall systems that were like you just made something and they ta-da, and then everything broke. We remember the first iteration of healthcare.gov. But the problem with iterative thinking or with agile thinking is that sometimes we iterate in the wrong direction. We're not thinking directionally what is a preferable future state. And so in service design, we typically begin by creating this baseline. We typically map the service as it exists today. And then we workshop. The first step is workshopping a future state that is not futurist. I mean, it's not 15 years into the future. It's typically strategic future, so 2 to 5 years, depending on the size and scope of the system, sometimes 6 months, where we actually create a preferable state where this service is grown or, you know, achieved whatever performance indicators it needs to achieve in the next time. And so it's improved in scale, it's improved in services. It also has better ethics, better accessibility. And then once we have that today's state and that preferable future state, we have our work carved to figure out how to backtrack so that we know that when we're iterating in the right direction. So typically, if this future is 2 years, then we would try to imagine, based on filters of physical feasibility, so technical feasibility, and also filters of economic viability. What would it look like a year from now? What would it look like 6 months from now? And then that typically helps us understand what we can do today as a minimum viable intervention, feature, service, product, to get driving in that direction. This is very important, of course, because we want to make sure that we avoid what user experience design or what sticky design, sticky UX has brought us to, which is a lot of negative externalities, you know, for example, social media addictions and things like that, that are a consequence, an undesirable consequence of, oh, let's make it super easy to use, let's make it super accessible, let's make it so that anybody can use it. And then before we know it, we're actually like, you know, fostering negative externalities that we should have thought about by creating these preferable future states.
Have any more questions in the room? Do we have any questions on Zoom? Okay.
Was that a question, or are we good?
No, there are no more questions from the room and on the Zoom. So thank you, Greg. Can we have a round of applause for him?
Thank you, folks. And again, I'm easy to find, and I'm always looking to have a conversation. So thank you for giving me your time today. You know, there's amazing sessions, so much appreciated. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, and I'm always happy to talk shop. And have a wonderful rest of the conference. I'll see you around.
Thank you. I
Thank
would
you, Abhishek.
request, yep. Thanks, Greg, for the session, and thanks everyone for joining. I would request you all to fill the end of session survey. We'll pull up the QR on the screen.
All right. Well, thanks again, folks. And again, find me if you want to continue the conversation, and have a wonderful rest of your day.